Well, good morning. Hey, how are we doing today? Woo! I'll take it. We're still starting there. Hey, before we get started, I want to remind you for our welcome card. If you didn't fill this out, maybe if you were a guest here, we just want to give you a gift. Thank you for being with us. You can grab that and fill it out, give it to me on your way out the door. Also, you know what's so cool about those Bible group sunshades? Is because a lot of churches, and we have them, like you put the sticker on your car, but maybe you drive like I do, right? Can I get an amen in next? Maybe you get a little angry sometimes on the road, but what's awesome about a sunshade is you park, you put up the sunshade, and nobody knows you're a terrible driver. Amen? So maybe you're a terrible parker and don't park in a handicap if you don't have that. But other than that, you can be a winner with a sunshade. So I'm just saying. But hey, today we are continuing our series of Quit Church. And if you've been with us, when we say quit church, what we are asking you to do is not literally leave church, but quit the actions, the attitudes, the traditions that maybe we associate with church that aren't actually biblical. We started this series and we talked about that we don't come and sit in a chair, but that we engage and we serve inside of a church. We talked after that about we need to stop and quit just throwing our money away, giving our money away, spending it on junk we don't need to impress people we don't like. I think that's a Fight Club reference. But instead is giving back to God. And then last week, as we actually have been studying, or we've done this off a book called Quit Church, and Pastor Chris Sonkson, who actually wrote that book, we got to hear from him when he talked about what it means to be loyal in a church. Well, today we're taking it a step further. And we're saying, quit hoping people will come. Now, as I thought about this sermon, I was like, I think I'm preaching to myself. Because I'm a pastor, and we planted this church. We are a birth church, and every Sunday, I would hang out there, and I'd be like, I just hope someone shows up today. Like, please, and make sure it's not just me and my wife and Josh singing with his guitar. I'm like, I hope someone comes up. But Chris says in his book that hope is a wonderful emotion. But man, it's a lousy strategy. You see, I talk to people all the time. And people from the church and from our community. And a lot of times when they want to talk to a pastor, it's not because I'm cool and hip and fun. It's like, hey, my life's a wreck. Can I talk to you now? I'm like, okay, cool. I'm here for you. So we sit down, we have coffee, we have lunch, and maybe they're having issues with their marriage or whatever. But one I constantly come across, and it just seems like it's an epidemic right now. It's like, hey, I currently am out of a job. And I really, really hope that I can find one. And my first question is, well, what are you doing to make that hope a reality? And you see, so often we let that idea permeate into every part of our life. I hope my marriage will get better. I hope my kids will stop being little jerks and listen to me one day. Right? I thought I'd hear a little more. I hope that our church will fill up with people, that our community will be impacted, that people will hear about this guy named Jesus and experience life change. I hope it happens. Well, you see, God has a brilliant strategy to reach our city. And we can hope that it will happen, but you see, we also get to be part of that happening. Because this brilliant, this wonderful, this amazing strategy that God has to reach our community, guess what? You are it. You are God's strategy. You are God's hands and feet. This past week, or actually 2 weeks ago, I got to meet this guy, and we had coffee and kind of talked about some stuff. I talked about the church, and I invited him to come. And lo and behold, usually I invite people, and it's like, that first week, they're like, nah, man, and then I bug them a lot, and then eventually maybe they come. But he showed up, and I'm like, oh, sweet. And then this past week, he reached back out to me. He said, hey, I'm really struggling. I need to find a job. He's like, but this is what I love. But he said, but I'm going through applications, but I could use some help. Could you put me with someone and kind of help me along? And just so happened, a couple weeks before that, when we talked about serving, this guy came up to me and said, I'm retired, I'm helping my family members get a job, I'm helping people, I do some financial help to kind of help them get on the right place. And I was like, hey, I'm going to connect you, I'm going to put you together, and we'll see what God does. You see, it is no different in the church. That if we want to take initiative in areas like our jobs and our families in order to move the needle forward, we have to do the same thing in our church life. But you see, I think sometimes we have another problem. Not only do we just hope that our church grows, but then we also can fall trap into the entertainment culture we have. You see, we live in a culture where we love to be entertained. That's why Netflix and sports and every YouTube are so popular. Full disclosure, I was a little bit productive yesterday morning, and then I went and watched preseason and college football for the rest of the day, and I don't think I left my house. So, amen for football season coming. All right, 2 of you can't, that's cool. If you want to be in a fantasy league, let me know. So anyway, so we entertain, we sit there, and sometimes it's good to decompress, and we get that, but sometimes we let that entertainment mindset creep into other areas of our life. And we'll come on Sunday mornings and we show up and say, man, I really hope they sing that song I like. Man, I hope that they got the right light settings. I hope that that key worship leader is still leading worship. I'm just kidding, Josh. Okay, no, we thought that was fun. I hope that the pastor doesn't ramble on and speak too much and he actually has a good sermon this week. I hope, and we come and we want to be entertained, we want to be take, and then, but God's saying, no, you come and be engaged. You see, many of us, we can come and we can be great fans and we can be great cheerleaders. I'm a huge Cardinals fan, but I know the difference between being a fan and putting my hand in the trenches and putting my hand in the dirt, because all 160 pounds of me would probably die on a football field. But you see, in a church, it is different. That God doesn't call us to sit on the sidelines and cheer and clap for a song and say, I'm good, I checked my box Sunday, I'm done. But rather, He calls us to be engaged in the mission of His kingdom. You see, my prayer today is that we would stop being fans, we would stop being cheerleaders, and we would start being players on the fields. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and just flip to Luke chapter 5. In Luke chapter 5, we're going to see an amazing story where 4 ordinary men, 4 people just like us, who were hoping their friend would be healed, they actually moved into action to get their friend to Jesus. In Luke chapter 5, we're going to be starting in verse 17. It says this. On one of those days while He was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there who had come from every village of Galilee and Judea, and also for Jerusalem. And the Lord's power to heal was in Him. Just then, some men came carrying on a stretcher a man who was paralyzed. They tried to bring him in and set down before him, that is, before Jesus. Verse 19, since they could not find a way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went on the roof and they lowered him on the stretcher through the roof tiles into the middle of the crowd before Jesus. Seeing their faith, He said, friend, your sins are forgiven. Then the scribes and the Pharisees began to think to themselves, who is this man who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? But perceiving their thoughts, Jesus replied to them, why are you thinking this in your hearts? 23, which is easier to say your sins are forgiven, or to say get up and walk? But so that you know that the Son of Man has all authority on earth to forgive sins, He told the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your stretcher, and go home. Immediately He got up before them. He picked up what he had been lying on. He went home glorifying God. Then everyone was astounded, and they were giving glory to God. And they were filled with awe and said, we have seen incredible things today. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank You this morning. Lord, I thank You for those that are here. God, I thank You for Your word that You have given us. I ask, God, that You open our hearts, that You soften them, that this not be a time that we come and just listen, check our box, and leave unaffected. But God, that You pierce inside of us. God, that You let Your word work. And Lord, we can be called to action this morning. We have all these things up in Jesus' name. Amen. You see, what I love about this story is right when it goes into it, we see that these men had a mission. You see, mission drives us. When I think of mission, I kind of think like it's a North Star that we look towards. Is we see it and it stays on path. And sometimes we'll get kind of off the track a little bit, we'll wander. But when we look at that star, we know back to where we're going. You see, people, organizations, everything has some sort of mission. For example, Instagram has a mission statement to capture and share the world's moments. Facebook has a mission statement. It's so that your grandma can have a public conversation with her kids that she thinks is private. No? Nobody's grandma does that? Come on now. I thought that was pretty good. Amazon has a mission statement to learn everything about you so they can make a clone of you that your spouse won't even know the difference of. Like, Alexa hears everything. I'm just saying. Like, they know. They send information back. Sometimes me and my wife test it. We like whisper to each other, like, hey, I want this. And then all of a sudden we see an ad for like boats pop up on our Amazon like ads. We're like, what in the world? She's listening and hears it all. And she's got a bug in like our brain or something. You guys are phone. I don't know. Anyway, so companies have mission statements, and those companies have legitimate mission statements. I just don't know what they are. But that's how they actually act. But we have mission statements to keep us on track. You see, Jesus had a mission statement when he came here. He said that for the Son of Man came to seek and save that which was lost. Jesus said, I didn't come here for you saved people. I didn't come here for the people in the church. I came here to those who were lost to find them and bring them back. You see, our church has a mission statement. And it goes along with what Jesus tells us, and we will read about this later, but it is to make Jesus known. You see it all over our campus. When we say, what is Cross Church about? Cross Church is about making Jesus known to people in our community around us. But you see, what was the defining mission for these men in our story? They simply wanted to see their friend walk. I have a question for you. What drives you? What is the mission in your life? What are you burdened about? What hurts your heart? And so often I think in church we have a lot of things we care about. We have a lot of things that it just make our heart hurt a little bit. But does it make your heart hurt when your children aren't following what God has for their life? Does it make your heart hurt when your neighbors, when your family members, when your friends live something so counterculture to what you at least say you live on Sunday mornings? You see, we should have a burden in our hearts to bring our friends to Jesus. You see, Aristotle once said that the soul never thinks without a picture. What do you see? When you talk about what hurts in your heart, what vision do you dream up of what you wish could be projected, wish could be shown to those around you? For these men, the vision, the picture, the mission they had was so simple. They simply wanted their friend to walk again. But here's what's so awesome. Not only did they have this mission of wanting to see their friend walk, but they also had an eager expectation that it would actually happen. Here's what I love so much is they went through craziness because they believed that Jesus could actually heal their friends. So much so that they were willing to risk it all in order to get their friend to Jesus. When was the last time you took a risk on God? You see, so often we say we trust God. We say, yes, I have an expectation that if I invite my friend, maybe they hear stuff, maybe they hear about Jesus, maybe they hear his word, we sing some cool songs. Do we have an expectation that their lives can be changed? Or do we just think like, yeah, they're probably not going to get affected. They're too lost. Like, I just don't know what's going to happen. But you see, these men thought, if we can just get them to Jesus, something can happen. If we just get there, we did our parts. You see, the Bible is full of stories of taking risks on God. On September 22nd, we're starting a new series and we're going to be going through the book of Joshua. And what I love about Joshua is he was a guy who was kind of scared and meek. And I know that because God, like 20 times through the book of Joshua, says, be strong and courageous. So opposite of strong and courageous is weak and scared. I'm like, me and Joshua got something in common with us. So he's telling me, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. And the whole world is pushing against Joshua. He's like, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to risk it on you and go forward. We see guys like Elijah in the Old Testament. And Elijah was one literally that politically everyone was against him. They went on top of a hill and they said, whichever bonfire lights first, that's the real God. It was Elijah against a bunch of crazy old pagan guys that were cutting things and was getting a little nuts. And he's like, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to bet it on God. And we see men like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Common dudes, nothing special. But that wouldn't compromise their faith. And they ended up getting thrown in a furnace. But what we saw is there was another one in the fire that they risked it on God, and he came through. You see, if you have an eager expectation that if you risk it on God, that something will happen. Maybe are you risking embarrassment with a friend, loss of community with a neighbor, loss of love with a family member, maybe in loss of a job with a co-worker. But here's the deal, 99% of the time, you're not going to get embarrassed, shunned, disowned, or fired. But even if you did, are you willing to risk that God will show up and God will show through and do his thing? You see, what I love about this passage is there was no plan B with these guys. If they didn't get their friend to Jesus, he wasn't walking. He was living in his state for the rest of his life. But they knew if they could only get him there, something could happen. But as in all stories, on the way there, they encountered an obstacle. They couldn't get into the house. It says right there the crowd was too big. The crowd was just blocking everything. It was like a busy summer day in Disneyland or whatever. They just couldn't get in. Like Mickey Mouse was swarmed, so that, like, all right, we're going to go to this line over here. I actually went to Disneyland a couple months ago, and it was insane. Like, we're like, we want our kid to get Mickey's autograph, but let's wait in this house for 40 minutes. It was fantastic. Anyway, but they tried to get in the house, and they're like, there's just no way. We can't get in. It's too blocked. It's too full. Like, we need another path. You see, I think a lot of us get into this situation where we say, invite our friends to church, share our faith, and we're like, yeah, I'm all for it. And then we try it once, and a door gets slammed in our face. We try it once, and someone's like, bro, don't put your Jesus on me. And like we try it again, and like we get pushed off. And we say that closed door, oh, God opens doors, so he closed this one, so I guess I'm free, I don't have to bug my friends anymore. But sometimes God wants us to kick in those doors. Sometimes God wants us to climb on a roof and dig a dead hole into the roof to get through. And sometimes those closed doors are just opportunities to blow through. The New Testament has this guy named Paul in here who started a lot of churches. And if Paul said no when a closed door came, we probably wouldn't have half the New Testament written. You see, God responds to our responses, as Chris said last week, and sometimes we got to push through. Sometimes we got to keep going when we encounter that obstacle. Now, as I was reading this, I was trying to rack my brain. I was like, how did they get the idea? How did they go from like, okay, I can't get to Jesus, there's a big crowd, to let's climb on the roof and dig a hole? Well, then I thought about, well, like, what kind of group would it take of people? What kind of like mixture would happen? And then I thought even more, I was like, well, what if our team did that? Like, we have an executive leadership team at our church here, and there's 4 of us, and I'm like, what would we do in that situation? So then I started breaking it down. And I'm like, okay, let's go through our leaders. First, we got Matt. He's a good-looking guy, isn't he? He's actually chilling on a boat right now. Hey, Matt, if you're watching. But Matt is an incredibly nice guy. He works in our tech team. He's our first impressions director. You didn't see him this morning, but you probably see him, one of the first faces as you walk through the door. Super friendly, super positive. The only thing against his character is his Seahawks fan, but we can let that pass. I pray he'll further his salvation to the Cardinals every single day. But other than that, he's a great guy. But one of the things I love about Matt is he's the encourager. So I painted this story, and I think as the 4 of us, we see the crowd. This is where Matt would pipe in and say, we got this, guys. I know we can find a way. He would encourage and say, we can do this. I'd be like, dude, it's over. Let's drop our friend. I'm out. Like, let's go find an out or something. Like, close the door, boom, we're done. But he'd be like, no, we got this. We can, hey, God's going to find a way. It's cool. Like, maybe we just got to go over here. We got to go over there. And he'd encourage us. And like, come on, guys. We can do it. We can do it. He's like that nice, friendly, happy guy. Totally different than me. And then I think, okay, taking from that encouragement, we go to our next staff member. That's Josh. He was really sunburned that day, I think, so that's why he's a little bit red there. But Josh is our worship leader, but he is also our creative thinker. Now, Josh always comes up with these great ideas. He's like, maybe we should do this. And by great idea, I'm like, no, that's terrible. Let's not do that. But it's creative, and it's out of the box. But I think this day, he would come up with a creative, out-of-the-box idea and say, why don't we climb up on the roof and we can probably get in through there. Maybe there's a little roof hatch. Maybe we can go through the attic or something like that. Would be great. Let's just go up on the roof, and I think we could build a system that gets him back down there safely, and we'll be fine. So we got the encouragement of that. That spawns Josh's idea of getting us on the roof. And so now we're here. We have this creative idea, and this is where I come in. No, that's the wrong guy. Okay, he's later. The best looking of the bunch, by far. I'm not sure why you're laughing. Okay, we're moving on. But I am the bulldozer. Okay, I think we'd get up on the roof, and Joshua, this is where his creativeness might die, like he's trying to make a pulley system or something, and we're like, we don't have time for this. That's why I hit a hole in the roof, and I think we're going to jump down in. Great example is my parents have moved to another house, and they were in their old house for 20 plus years. And I'm pretty sure they were hoarders. So we moved a lot of this stuff out, but there's still, like, I go there like a couple times a week, and he's like, can you help me move stuff? I'm like, why is there so much crap here? I'm like, I'm throwing all this away. But somehow, and I was in flip-flops, I ended up last week in my dad's attic in flip-flops off of a tiny ladder so I could like jump in and pull myself up. Don't really know how I did it, to be honest. And then I look in there and there's all these computer boxes from like the 1980s that are full of dust and insulation. I'm like, what is going on here? But that's my personality. It's like, hey, I don't see how we're going to do this. Why don't we just jump in and then we'll just figure it out as we go. So digging a hole in the roof, probably have insurance money or something, you have to pay for that. But let's just hit the hole through and let's fall down in, and then we get to Jesus, and that's where Scott comes in. And Scott is our last one, the guy you saw earlier, and he is our resident theologian, Bible group director. But this is what he said: I told you, we just need to trust God. And God's got this. And God had a plan that he foreordained before the beginning of time that we would get our friend to Jesus. I don't know why you ever had lacked faith that God knew this would happen. You see, I kind of see that's how that story went. Is that good? I think that's right. Let's do it right now. Okay, we're going to dig a hole in the roof. But this is how I see this happening. How these friends, these encounter this obstacle. I don't know how we're going to get through. How in the world do we get into Jesus? We hit this. But it just took a little bit of encouragement. It took a little bit of thinking. It took a little bit of bullishness. It took a little bit of trusting God that, hey, throughout this, we can still make it to Jesus. But here's what's so awesome. Is sometimes that's us. Sometimes that's you, where you don't know that, you just trust that God's going to make it happen. I'm going to claw and get my friend here. I'm going to tell him about Jesus. I'm going to get him to church, but I don't really know what's going to happen. Like, I hope he heals him. I hope something happens. But in this situation, and I think in most situations, they actually got a little bit more than they bargained for. Check out verse 25. It says, immediately he got up before them. This is what Jesus, after he heals him, he picked up what he had been lying on, and he went home glorifying God. I love this, that everyone was astounded, and they were giving glory to God. They were filled with awe, and they said, we have seen incredible things today. You see, they were expecting him just to heal him. They were expecting, they had this expectation, I think Jesus could heal my friends. But he didn't just heal his external. He also forgave his sins. And he healed the true problem, which was what was internal. And sometimes we think that maybe if I just get my friend to church, they'll like it, they'll connect, they'll start a routine of coming to church. And it'll be better if they were at church than sit home watching football, especially those early games that don't matter, or you just DVR and watch it later. But it's just better if they're here. But sometimes we get more than they bargained for. And God actually changes their heart in a miraculous way that we can't even understand. You see, Jesus blew them out of the water. And Jesus tells us in this moment that we shouldn't settle for the mundane when Jesus wants to do the miraculous in our lives. Listen, at some point, you were the paralyzed person laying on a mat, and someone, whether it was a parent, whether it was a friend, they drug you to Jesus in front of there and laid you down. And they let him work. Who in your life is paralyzed, laid down before you? Who is God calling you to not just sit on the sidelines, but to go move forward and change their life? And you may be thinking, well, I don't like people that much. Why? Is this really my job? I don't know if I care enough, whatever. If that's your stance, then I'm at least going to give you what Jesus said here, is why do we have to go tell people about Jesus? Why do we have to go invite them to church? Well, I'll give you Matthew 28:19. It says, as Jesus is leaving earth, and he takes his disciples, or the last thing he's leaving earth, he gets before his disciples, and he says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Acts 1:8, which we spent about 6 months going through the book of Acts last year, says, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." You see, if you consider yourself a Christian, it's not an optional thing of I need to tell people about Jesus. He kind of requires it of us. And I love the story we heard of Elizabeth this morning. Because, man, and you don't even see her in service right now because she's serving in nursery for the first time. So not only is she inviting her friend, but she's plugging in and serving. And the reason why I love that is because I hear these stories all the time of I invited my friend, I invited my friend, I invited my friend. And then we have people who sit in church for 20 years and have never invited a person. You see, it's just unacceptable. Because what God calls us to do in our lives is to invite and to invest in those people that we see, that those people that are in our lives to make a difference with and bring and drag and carry to the feet of Jesus. So you're like, well, how do I do this? Well, let me give you the practical application. But first, I would say is you need to start investing. Relationally connect with those in your circle of influence. And maybe if you're thinking and you hear that, you're like, I don't know if I have an influence or I influence anyone or have any sort of circle. Just think hard. You do. You influence your kids. You influence your spouse. You influence your coworkers, whether that's positively or negatively, whether they like you or not. You influence your neighbors, especially if you like park in front of their spot or you're loud all the time. You influence them in the middle of the night. Whatever it is, you influence those people in some way. And then it goes to the next step. Is to invite. Ask your friends, ask your family, ask your coworkers to a place where they can meet Jesus. And sometimes this happens with people you've been with for a long time that you've relationally connected with, and sometimes it happens with light relationships. Just yesterday I was at Starbucks. We do a monthly gathering with a group of guys that we do some studies through, and we meet at the same Starbucks. Because there's no other better coffee around, so we just meet there. So we go to that Starbucks, and then each month I buy a box of Lamar's donuts. Anyone have Lamar's donuts? Nobody said anything. You guys need to go to Lamar's like right after we eat fried chicken and go crazy. Bell at 17 will change your life. But so we take a box of Lamar's and we give them to Starbucks employees, and that's all they care about. They don't care if I order a drink. They're just like, we love you because we look forward to this Saturday. And I'm like, I'm glad. But yesterday, I'm giving this guy, Carter, who I've met and really just know from our Starbucks negotiations of me giving him donuts. And I'm like, are you going to give me a free drink? I just gave you a box of donuts, but no, I didn't do that. Anyway, he's a nice guy. So I'm talking to Carter, and he said, hey, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, that's random. I'm like, are you a stalker? But I'm like, yes, I do. Like, I went to college with him, and then we struck up a conversation, and all of a sudden we have all these mutual friends. And I'm like, dude, hey, well, you should come to church with us. We are right down the road. You know where we are. He's not engaged anywhere. And he didn't come this morning. That doesn't mean I'm going to start pestering him every time I give him donuts. I'm going to say, like, do you want these donuts to keep coming? No, I'm just kidding. Still a lot of guys. But sometimes it works with your neighbors. Sometimes it's those family members. Sometimes it's those coworkers. Sometimes it's that person you have that light relationship with. But he's not saying, hey, I think, should I invite this person? Should I not? Yes is the answer. We should be investing in those relationships, and we should be inviting. And then that last step is to include. Get them around your church friends, and get them around where you serve. You know, sometimes people struggle so much because they don't have a strong support system. We're about to launch Celebrate Recovery next month, and really the entire ministry of Celebrate Recovery is helping people, being a support system along in their recovery journey. Did I get that right, Dave? Yeah, see? That's my summary of Celebrate Recovery. That's what we want. We want to be a resource, be a love and outreach for people. And so often people can't walk this line with Jesus because they feel isolated and alone. And so often it just takes that inclusion with your life, getting messy, getting dirty, and including them with you as well. And saying, hey, we're not perfect, but we're walking through this together. Here's how I'm going to send you out today. That we talked throughout this year, and we talked a lot about it leading up to Easter, is asking this question, because maybe you hear all this and you're a little overwhelmed. You're like, I don't know who I'm going to invite. I don't know how I can invite everyone. I'm not that nice. I don't like talking to people. I just want to go home and take a nap right now. And you're like, I don't know where to start. My question for you is, who is your one? If you don't know, if you can't start with 5, you can't start with 10, ask who is the one person that you can invite to church, that you can invest in, and that you can see and share Jesus Christ with. We have this cross, this wooden cross that you about tripped over probably on your way in. And earlier this year, we wrote names on that. There are Sharpies attached to that cross. And we ask you write that name, you pray for them, and then you don't just hope they come, but you proactively lead them to come. And my challenge to you this morning is that as you leave here today, and right before we go eat some fried chicken, that you take some time, you write a name on that cross that you'll be praying for, that you will be inviting to church, and to see their life change when they are brought to Jesus. Let's pray.